All right, set to go, Renee. Okay, and if you could just bring up the other presentation, please. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're very excited to kick off our Zoom series of Advancing Minds, Advocating Change. Today we have our very own William Horne joining us, who's the former Majority Leader of the Nevada Assembly. He's going to be going through a few questions with me, and then we're going to be doing some questions and answers at the end based off of the presentation. So we're just going to get the presentation up here in just a second. Okay. All right, so is that open? On my end, Renee, I cannot see that. Let me see here. Okay, great, there we go, perfect. If you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here we go. Sorry for the delay, everyone, apologize for that. So just a little bit about William's background. He got his Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice in '99 from UNLV. While he was there, he got the scholarship from UNLV President Carol Harder, which he was very proud of. He also was involved with the Pi Kappa Pi Honor Society while earning his JD from the William Boyd School of Law, which he attained in 2001. He also was a president of the Pi Alpha Delta, the international law fraternity. He's currently on the advisory committee for the Greenspun College of Urban Affairs. He was elected to the Nevada State Legislature in 2002, Assembly District 24. After he joined, he won the Outstanding Freshman Assemblyman Award in 2003. And he was also named one of the top 5 most effective legislators in the Assembly in 2005. And as I mentioned, is currently the former Majority Leader of the Nevada Assembly. So if you could, Liam, please go to the next slide. Okay, so to kick off here, William, first question, how do you identify priorities for each legislative session and key objectives at a manageable level? And if you could, please touch on the importance of understanding your audience, prioritizing goals for legislative session and for private fundraising, the influence of the UNLV Alumni Association, and the North-South divide for resources, UNR versus UNLV.
All right, thanks, Landon. So when you're talking about, particularly in this age of COVID, your time is very precious on how much you have in order to get your information out. You're advocating for in front of these policymakers, right? Even in the best of times, the legislative session, for instance, is in only for 120 days. And so you've got a very finite amount of time of which to present your issues. But now, even more so, in that we're not doing it in person. It's all virtual. The legislative building is closed. So it's really important to have your, understanding who your audience is because of what's your issue. I mean, if you haven't done that homework yet, you're really behind. If, for instance, if you're talking about, let's say, raising property taxes 25%, and you're circulating that idea amongst Republican lawmakers, you're spinning your wheels, right? You need to know your audience. So you might need to identify who's gettable out of those Republicans, right? Who could possibly swing your way. A lot of people go into this not knowing who they're talking to and what their positions are. You've got to have that down. Also, we can all think of a list of things that we want in a particular given session, right? But it's very, very rare that people get everything that they want on this list. And because you have your time constraints that you have, it's very important to identify maybe your top 3 things that you want. And even when you do that, it's important to say, hey, this might be my top 3, but I know I'm not getting number two. That's just not going to happen. And so being honest with yourself and calling it down to something that's manageable. And again, this is all that's done prior to, and I'll stick with the legislative meeting, right? This whole time they're only in session every other year for 120 days. So that time they're not in, that's when the real work and a lot of the stuff is being done. So that, is important for you to have that in mind when you're going into, a session and during the interim. The Alumni Association certainly has been increasing its influence going forward, and this is really important because we have finite amount of dollars, right? The formula that's used has been changed in recent years on how state dollars goes out through INCHE. But it takes more than just the administrators at the various schools going and soliciting the legislators. It takes, advocates that are alums. I mean, believe it or not, we talk about the North-South, rivalry and everything with dollars, but that's a true thing where with the recent changes, before that happened, arguably Northern Nevada, particularly UNR, was getting I won't say unfair, but this way the mechanism was put in place before. And as we grew, UNLV and Southern Nevada schools, CSN, Nevada State, et cetera, weren't getting their appropriate shares. So the formula had to be changed to do that. That took a number of advocates, to make this argument that, hey, it's time to make this change to make our funding formula a little more equitable. And it doesn't take a lobbyist like me just to do it, or even a legislator who represents down here. It's also the graduates from the schools, to say, hey, this is important, and here's why. And currently right now, when we're talking some priorities that are in before Ways and Means and Senate Finance, is funding for the engineering building down here and our newly accredited medical school. How awesome is that? But we got to put muscle behind that, and that has to come also from the alums in doing it.
Gotcha. No, thank you. That's a great response. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the third point there, the influence of the UNLV Alumni Association, like particular individuals that you have relationships with who have been able to move influence in our favor?
Yeah, so for instance, the way our state, and everybody knows it's a small state, and it's only a couple of degrees of separation, but for instance, our current speaker, Jason Frierson, and I went to law school together. We actually served on the law school governing board together. And when I was a legislator first, he was a lobbyist. And so, and then also our Attorney General, Aaron Ford, met him when we were in law school. These are examples of how, your relationships that you build in undergrad, in graduate school, et cetera, can lend you access into not just even legislative, but in business and everything else. And when I had my own lobbying firm, there was a young student that wanted to do an internship out in DC and needed some money for living expenses. So my partner and I wrote a check for $2,500. And it was happy. He says, oh yeah, I can live on this for the summer, the internship, doing that. It's great. Well, this person ended up coming back to Nevada and being on staff in the Senate leadership office. And that provided us enormous access because this particular student, knew us and knew what we were about, but we helped him. So, and it wasn't that he got us yes votes or no votes when we wanted it, but it was another door into a policymaker's office, right? By doing something, by just doing what? Just giving back, giving to a student that was from UNLV that needed some help. And my partner and I believe in reaching down and bringing those people up, just like someone did for us, right? And it pays itself forward exponentially.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And that's some question I get a lot from people who are not involved with the Alumni Association is, what value is there by me joining? And I always say it's just those relationships that you build, those bridges that you create, and just it taps, unlimited resources. So I'm always trying to promote that to everybody listening.
And absolutely. And just even reaching into down to the undergrads, for instance, we need to get to a place to where undergrads can't wait to become members of the Alumni Association, right? To be able to tap into all those relationships and be able to grow and make a difference, not only in their life and their career, but with the university, right? And we need to be better at that, right?
I agree 100%. That's very well stated. And one follow-up as well, because I know this hits close to home for a lot of people as far as the north-south divide for resources, UNR versus UNLV, because you often hear that UNR does have their unfair share of representation and resources as a legislator. Could you elaborate just a little bit more about the catalyst that is causing that pendulum to swing more in UNLV's favor?
Well, I think in part, as the state has grown, and we all know the lion's share of the population, economic engine is down here. And so when I was the majority leader, when we made the first change to the funding formula, I headed that up. I went to both Democrat and Republican lawmakers that were from down here and saying the time is now. We recognize that, Senator Raggio was a force to be reckoned with at the time he was there and doing it. But as the state has grown and the needs have grown, we've had to make this shift. And so I lobbied them, even as a lawmaker, I advocated for, Southern Nevada, and I got them to agree. This is the area you represent. Let's have some more equity. The whole state can thrive if we do this. And I was successful at getting that done. And it wasn't everything we wanted to do, but it was a necessary change that needed to be made. And unfortunately, one of the northern lawmakers, Debbie Smith, was a dear friend. I love her, like Debbie Smith. But she and I butted heads over that, and our relationship kind of changed from that. And it was, regrettable, but sometimes, you explain this to people. Sometimes, people of the same party don't agree, and you can find allies across the aisle, for something good. And that happened to work that way. And hopefully we can continue to, do stuff like that for the good of the state. I think it's the whole state. I wouldn't want to disadvantage northern and rural Nevada either.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating on that. And I agree 100% about trying to find those allies and that common ground so you can just get those objectives achieved, even if you can't get your entire list, just, the top 2 or 3 that you're really gunning for. So thank you.
Like a football game, let's just move the increment down the field,
Exactly, inching along. Great, well, thank you so much for that, Wim. If we could, Renee, go to the next question, please. Okay, how is the world of advocacy different today versus pre-COVID? And if you could, please elaborate on virtual versus face-to-face communications with legislatures, key decision makers, and university officials, also face-to-face advantages in a pre-COVID world, and adapting to phone, virtual, and email communication.
Yeah. Oh, hey, there's a lot. So it's a whole new world, right? And and particularly, being a lobbyist and advocate, one of the skill sets that we have found to be important is be able to read people, right? Whether it's, when you're doing a one-on-one in a legislator's office, or when you're presenting in a committee or even sitting in a committee and looking at the committee and reading the members to see if an argument is being bought or not, or if somebody's paying attention or not. Is it the same as when I was attorney? You're reading the jury, you're reading the judge. Well, now you don't have that in-person type thing, and it's an intangible that you can't put your finger, but it's different when you're in the room with somebody as opposed to when we're like what we're doing right now, right? This two-dimensional, this TV screen, computer screen, talking with each other. And so you have to find new way. You're communicating kind of more in this thing. There's more follow-up with text message, hey, thanks for taking the time to do the video conference with me, Senator. And I just wanted to follow up with this text or this email to do this, and everything. And then maybe even a phone call. There's a lot of different touches, but they're just not in person. Mm-hmm. And so you lose that advantage. There's the advantages that you had when it was doing a face-to-face. They're just gone, but you have to adapt. You really have to adapt to get the job done, right? You can't just fold up and say, oh, well, we've got to wait till it's all passed. The world's still turning. Mm-hmm. And so the phone calls and the emails and the text messages become that much more important, right? You have to really stay on top of it. And also you have to be mindful of the language you use. A lot of stuff gets lost in textation, right? You say something, someone takes it the wrong way, as opposed to when you're hearing someone and you can hear inflection in their voice, you can hear sarcasm, you can do and sometimes that doesn't translate in an email or a text message. So you really need to be careful when doing it, particularly when you're advocating, right? You don't want to undermine yourself in doing that. So these are important skills, right? That you have to develop. And because we're not in the days of old where you could even just go in to the office, catch them in the hallway and say, hey, I just want to develop, hope you didn't take it the wrong way. Or, oh, no, we were just laughing. It was just, So it's different.
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to the context of a conversation through a text or an email being very limited versus that face-to-face conversation. And I'm so looking forward to the days when we can get back to, those in-person meetings, because myself being in the sales role, going to these different conferences, it seems like I can have such an efficient use of my time when I'm doing face-to-face versus the amount of work that goes into the calls and the emails and the text messages and all that follow-up. It seems like that can all be greatly condensed if you have that face-to-face interaction. So I'm sure we're all very, very anxious to get back to that time, and we'll be very grateful when we do return to that time. So thank you for elaborating on that. And let's go to the next question, please, Leanne or Renee. What is the importance of casting an advocacy net to cultivate future alumni, students / affinity clubs for the Alumni Association? And if you could please elaborate on how to get future alumni involved in advocacy, not just on our advocacy committee, how to engage students before they graduate, because they often ask, what have you done for me lately? And helping students advance their goals before they graduate. So
I think this is something we, touched on a little bit earlier, and it's something that, the Alumni Association has struggled with, and advocacy has struggled with over the years. But I think it's important to actively go out to these, affinity clubs, and to these colleges. And you can do this by, having not just the whole typical, tailgate party or things like that, because we're not
Yeah.
doing those anymore.
Extracurricular things.
But you can, do that by, reaching out to these colleges and offering mentor, to mentor, to talk to groups at a time, doing like this, and I've done this for, other organizations as well, and say, this is who I am, this is what I'm about. And reach out to me, if you have any questions and stuff, and, to the extent I can, I will help you. I can point you in the right direction. We need to do that, and then bring them in also with projects that we have, and say, hey, what can you offer at this table? This is how you're going to get them engaged after they're given alum, because they're engaged in undergrad, right? And so if you can get them engaged in projects along while they are still in undergrad, and they can see the efforts, what they're contributing to the successes of the Alumni Association and the Advocacy Committee, that will help bring them into the fold, and be productive alum, right? When they're out in the real world. Because I mean, we've probably, all of us have heard, have friends that we've tried to get engaged to the Alumni Association in some way or another and stuff. And sometimes the response is, but they never did anything for me. School didn't do anything. Hey, I graduated and stuff and never heard from anybody. And certainly didn't hear from when I was in undergrad. And so they feel, disconnected. And if they were ever connected to begin with, right? So one person I talked to said, there was a table about the Alumni Association when they first got at campus as a freshman, and then there was nothing else. Occasionally they go to the football game, to the tailgate thing, but that was it, and nobody else was ever reaching out. So we've got to do better at doing that, and reaching out, helping them with our expertise. I mean, look at who's all the members of the board, right? We've got, talent experts, across the spectrum of stuff. And this needs to be put out, in my opinion, to the colleges to have the, here's a group that we can tap into, the alumni board, and to get you the help or the connections that you need, and it may not be Landon Shores himself, but it could be like, Landon, this, group has asked about, sales or whatever, or who's in the community that, yep. And you can connect them to that. They'll find value in that. And that's how we're going to do that.
That's such a great point. And that's something that Stacy and I, when we spoke on several of these panels to students, we always elaborate on how we're just so grateful when they reach out to us and they ask us questions, because, after you're in the industry for a while, you just get jaded with the amount of information that you have and all the knowledge that you've accumulated. And you just kind of think, even when you go speak to these classes, like, oh, I wonder what I can share with them. And as they start to peel back that onion and ask you those questions, you're like, oh, wow, I guess I wouldn't have known that when I was 20 years old, and I wouldn't have any of these connections. And I just love it after doing those presentations. I know both Stacy and I have this experience when a student reaches out and is like, hey, I really liked what you spoke about. I would love to connect with you for coffee and, potentially meet some of your connections in your network. Like, we're all about that. And I love just being able to build those inroads for students and really expose them to all that my industry has to offer. And I think that we can do a much better job at the university level doing that as well, engaging them before they graduate. So their first experience at the Alumni Association is not at a table where they're trying to recruit people.
Right. And it's so rewarding, right? It when you see it, I'm going to call them out. Elena Cowley, used to work for me when I was a legislator, and I convinced her to come up and be my attaché up in Carson City, and she got her first lobbying job from that, and then went on to, get her master's. Look what she's doing now. I mean, she's a rock star. Mm-hmm. And I take pride in that, and then you have Brittany, Ship Walker, she worked for me as the majority leader. Then she was thinking about going to law school, and they said, okay, let me know when you're done thinking about it, and then getting, she's in law school and she's knocking it out of the park, and she clerks at the Supreme Court. Now she's the city attorney of Boulder City, right? This is the type of outreach that we need to be doing. And I'm sure all of us have stories like this that we can tell. We just need to broaden it out, and get it. And I have no doubt that those two young ladies are reaching out as well and having impacts on people's lives. And that only bodes, well for, the Alumni Association, UNLV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that about Elaine and Brittany. That must give you such a feeling of fulfillment to be able to see them advancing up through the ranks like that, and know that you had a direct role in that, and to see how they'll, pay it forward, pass that along as they advance in their careers, and then they help the next person up. So it's just very fulfilling to see that chain that you had initiate just pay off dividends for all the students who come after you. And I really think that's what the Alumni Association is all about. That's our value, is really helping our members advance after they graduate, and having that strong network that they can call upon. And I think that you elaborate on that brilliantly. So thank you so much. All right, and now those are the three questions I had, and I would like to open up the floor to see what other questions we may have. And I have not been monitoring the chat function here. So Renee, are we going to open up so they can just ask the questions? Or are we going to go right through the chat function?
We can allow people to unmute themselves and go ahead and answer questions.
Okay, yes, that would be perfect. I would love to do that. So if there's anyone in attendance today who has any questions for William about advocacy, could be unrelated to the three questions that I just asked. That was just meant to be a springboard to start the dialogue. But if there's anything at all you'd like to know, please feel free to fire away, and I'm sure he'd be happy to extrapolate on that.
Landon, it's Stacy Purcell. Thank you, first of all, as chair of the Advocacy Committee, and the committee too, the dynamic committee, Leanne Lee, everyone, for this opportunity to speak with William, to have him to give us the insight, the resources, the access, which he's given from the first time I was firsthand with him on the engagement committee, and we went to Carson City and did all that good work and created Advocacy Day up there the last session. But William, I got to tell you, I am a big fan of yours, and you talk about paying it forward and how you use your resources and your power, your voice, your efforts, your knowledge and experience. I mean, when we were up there enjoying all of the privileges to get in because of you and Leanne and Paul and Gina. Gina Bon Jovi's on this call. We went up with President Dr. Miana, and we were in the governor's office, and we were doing, what we do is asking for priorities. And I'm so grateful for that first dealing that we had and being on the committee together and just the work that you do. So I don't have a question. I just really admire how you advocate and how you use your resources to help the Alumni Association and advance us that way and get us the access to these two big priorities we have on the table right now with the medical school. We're very proud of, the recent news on that, as well as engineering. So I just want to say thank you forever, William. And again, I'm a big fan, and whatever you can give us, when we can get on a call for a hearing or anything like that, to get ahead and to make our voices present, I appreciate. And call out to Rob Leverett. I haven't seen you in years. Thank you for all the work you do as well, Rob. UNLV, go fight, win.
Thanks, Stacy.
Yes, thank you for that, Stacy. And I will say it was awesome to speak with William the other day before this for over an hour, and just, as I mentioned earlier, like the amount of knowledge and information that you attain throughout your career that you take for granted, like just hearing all of his stories. It's such a foreign world to me. So I thought it was just so interesting, and he's just so enthusiastic about it. And I just love how passionate he is about sharing that information with all of us and really advancing the cause for the Alumni Association and the university. So thank you again, William. And we can go to the next question. Please just fire away.
Hey, this is Carl Catarata. Hi, William, and I just want to say thank you so much to Stacy and also Leanne so much for the invitation today. My name is Carl Catarata. I'm a senior at UNLV studying political science, but in my full-time job, I work for City Councilman Brian Knutson, and I have the opportunity to serve on the Nevada Commission on Mentoring for the state. Recently, the commission was up on Senate Bill 76. And my question for you, William, is not pertaining to the bill, not pertaining to the bill. I know, all those bills have all those texts and stuff like that. This is my first time testifying before the legislature. But my question to you, in your really robust experience, I had noticed, being a staffer here at the city level, and then also realizing, there are staffers on the state level as well. I realized that before my testimony, I did not have that relationship, that strong relationship with the staffers at the state level. So what would your advice be when it comes to, creating that relationship with, staffers at state agencies specifically, that are, by the time the legislature comes around, they're essentially doing all the back work when it comes to it. That would be my question. And again, thank you so much for your leadership, and thank you so much to the UNLV Alumni Association.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, oftentimes your very first contact with the policymakers is with staff, right? And building that relationship is, extremely important, and oftentimes even the gatekeeper. And I see Senator Parks, David Parks, on the call, and he's got far more experience than I've got. And he'll probably tell you as well that, if you've dismissed the importance of staff, you've missed the boat on doing this. And sometimes it starts off by simply, in those first introductions is, dealing with them the way you want to be dealt with, right? They are not just a cog in the wheel, right? They serve an important function, and they deserve that respect in getting it. And so they're not an obstacle to overcome. They are important personnel that you should get to know and know what their job is. It's important to understand what it is they do. And once you do that, they will appreciate that. You have no idea how much they'll appreciate that, and I can tell you, it's not that they, necessarily, they don't get to push the button, yes and no, and all that, but they can be in a position to say, you know what, this person here, I would bend over backwards to try to help them do that. And this person here, I'll get around to it. It makes a world of difference. And so I can tell you, people who disrespected my staff or treated them rudely and stuff like that, wouldn't do it again. That was the number one rule that I said in my committees that I chaired and stuff like that. It was not tolerated, so be mindful of that. And I'm sure Senator Parks kind of had the same philosophy.
I love that, William, about bending over backwards versus I'll get around to it. That's so hilarious that you say that, because it's so true. Like those that you prioritize based on, your interactions with them and the list of their needs. So glad I touched on that. And we have a question from Shema in the chat. Given the limited time you have to talk to a senator, what are the main components that you make sure you include in your advocacy pitch?
Well, when you have a limited amount of time, like I said before, you should already have your main bullet points that you want. You should be able to leave with them, if you can, even now it's an email or whatever, something more comprehensive. But you should be able to walk through in the bullet points. This is what I'm seeking to do. I need these three things, for instance, and here is why, what I need, and why I need it. And then don't forget to make your ask. Can I get your support? Try not to get into the weeds on things. You'll lose your time. If a policymaker, if you put out your bullet points in the right way, it can elicit questions from that policymaker, and then say, okay, I have a question about this. That'll allow you to expand a little bit, but first get your key points out first, like that, and then you can fill it in later, and hopefully with your key points that are important to what you're trying to do will elicit that curiosity from that policymaker.
Mhm. I like that. And that's something I find in sales role as well, as a lot of times you want to put so much fluff on something, but these key decision makers have very limited time. So it's like, just get to, the top 2 or 3 things that you really need. And then don't be afraid to ask, right? Because you go through all these motions, but it's just that you have to ask at the end for what you're actually looking for. So,
right. And that's very important if you're just doing a phone call. With a phone call, you can't even tell if you have their attention, right? So if you start going off on a tangent or getting off in the weeds and stuff like that, they could be, changing spark plugs in their car or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't know, so get to the nitty gritty right away.
Great. And going back to what we had talked about before, when you have that face-to-face, you know that you have their undivided attention, where if it's a phone call, they're probably multitasking, chasing their cat around the house, doing whatever else. So you don't know how much of you're actually capturing.
Yeah.
Let's see, do we have, we have a question from Lawrence Henley here. Can you talk about what are the biggest threats to higher education during the 2021 session? Great question, Lawrence.
Yeah, geez, the biggest threats, I would say, is off the top of my head is revenue, right? Everything's suffering. Our coffers are low, if not empty. And we need our economy to turn around to do that. Unfortunately, there are going to be some projects in higher education that aren't going to get the funding that they request or they need, going forward. And that can, actually derail some projects, right? And it could be a small amount of money to, in the big scheme of things, but for that particular department or something, it could be big, and it could be the difference of, that program closing completely, losing employees to, having to wait to the following year. And here we got biennium budgets, so you're waiting 2 years. I think that right now is the biggest thing. Also, the second one is, I'm curious to know how college students, particularly, your freshmen and sophomore, are dealing with the social distancing, the virtual learning in school, and doing that, and how that will have an impact on the higher education as well.
Okay. Thank you, Emma. Hopefully that answered your question, Lawrence. And going back, there's one that I overlooked, and I do apologize, Linda. Do you have a written brochure or other written materials about Strategies 360, and will you be able to get a copy of your PowerPoint? And are you available to make community presentations to people who may be somewhat removed from the legislative process? How do we contact you? Thank you, and sorry once again for missing that earlier.
No problem. I don't have. You can go to the strategies360.com, and you can see the firm and in all our locations and all the staff personnel that takes up, and I can be reached there. My contact info is there as well. The PowerPoint slide you saw, that's the product of Landon and Leanne. And so I'm sure they can get that to you. And yes, I've spoken to other groups before, and be happy to reach out, and we can make that happen.
I appreciate that, William. It's awesome that you make yourself so available to not only our alumni, but the community as well. So it's greatly appreciated. And let's see here if we don't have any further questions, unless I missed one in the chat box. So if anyone else has anything to ask, please feel free to submit that, or go right ahead and just verbalize.
Hey, I'll go. Hi, Landon. This is Gina Bon Jovi. Hi, William. Good to
Hey,
see
Gina.
you, Stacy. Hi, guys. It's great to see you all.
Great to see you back, Gina.
So, yeah, the government affairs piece, I mean, even though I went to law school and I practice as a lawyer, the government affairs thing is a completely foreign concept. So, William, you made the point earlier that this is not something, I mean, something that people in the business kind of take for granted. And I want to thank Leanne for when Stacy, you referenced the UNLV day we had a few years ago, and Leanne had printed up this, like, here's your 101 on what the legislative session is like. And if you can like formalize that into any sort of like glossy piece that you can submit to people, I mean, I've been begging the chamber for years to put something like that together, because not everybody knows beyond I joke, it's like the Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law. And it's far more complex than that. So anyway, I want to commend you guys for continuing this advocacy piece. It's so important. And William, I just wondered if you could share, like, for the people who are starting like flat-footed, potentially behind the starting line, what would you recommend them, the first 3 steps they would take to really like start on their journey to becoming an involved advocate?
Oh, it's a good question, Gina. So first, so you got your various different types of that, people who they have pet projects and they work for, want to volunteer for a nonprofit with their company. But the very first steps is, identifying who you're going to advocate to get your issue resolved, right? If for instance, you basically it's knowing where to go in your eyes. You need to establish that first. You get people that are calling their legislators, about people speeding down their neighborhood, roads and potholes, things like that. And while those legislators know who to contact and do it, that's probably not your first place you want to go, right? It's like you're going to be your city, county commission, those types of things. So you need to know where to go for that assistance. Also, do your homework. You should know your issue better than the policymaker which you're trying to convince or ask for help. There's a number of times you get people come up testifying in a position of something, but they don't know that issue themselves. They have a superficial knowledge of what they may want or whatever like that, but they haven't really done their homework on doing it. Because part of being an advocate is to educate that policymaker which you're trying to get them to act and make some kind of change. Those are really some fundamental things that that get missed, and especially the doing your homework part. It really comes across that you were ill prepared to do that, and you got to be prepared. And the last thing is, do not be afraid to ask for help. To say, hey, I'm stuck here, or I don't know where to go for this, or how to do this. It's very important. And to give you an idea, it's kind of like outside advocacy, but not really. Senator Ira Hanson, I like telling this story. He and I served together. We're on opposite ends of the political spectrum and everything, and then, but always respectful. In 2015, the Republicans went into the majority of both houses. He became chairman of Judiciary, which I used to chair. He reached out to me and asked me to his office and asked for advice. And he did that on more than one occasion. How do you do this? How do you do that? Now, he could have done this, stick his heels in. Oh, I'm not going to talk to that Democrat. We don't agree on anything, but he didn't. He was smart. He says, okay, this is somebody who knows how to do it. He did it right. And I'm new at doing this. And so I'm going to reach out and do that. And not everybody has that, character in which to do that, right? And that's important, to know what you don't know, and then reach out to where you can get that answer, to get that help, that knowledge. And Ira was smart at that. And he probably reached out to some other people as well. We still have political differences, sure, but I really appreciate the fact that he could put that all aside and say, I need some help. I don't know how to do this. And so that's the, suggestions that I would give, Gina.
And William, as a follow-up to Gina's question, I'm just curious, when we see the media all the time, it seems that on the national stage, it's so polarized and it's so partisan, and it seems rarely anyone ever crosses the aisle to collaborate on anything. There's very few issues that seem to get bipartisan support. Do you find that's the climate in the state legislature as well, or is it much more amplified in a negative way on the national stage, or just what are your insights as far as that goes?
I would say that it's not as bad at the state level as it is the national level in DC, but it's definitely been traveling in that direction, and it's unfortunate. During the time that I served, and maybe Senator Parks can attest to this, or whatever, they'll tell you that probably 90% of the stuff that we passed with her was bipartisan. It's those few things that we have differences on, and that's also the whole if it bleeds it leads kind of thing. The press picks up on that conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those things, and oftentimes those conflicts also, to be fair, are important, right? They're important conflicts, and so but the thing is we've gotten to this tribalism that is actually stifling our growth, right? It's if you can't sit there and say hey, this Republican has a great idea, might want to tweak it a little bit, but I like the concept, and this Democrat, no, you know what? It makes sense at what she said. So let's see how we can make that happen. Not that the whole if it's, because literally we've seen where it's a bad idea until the other side introduced it in another session, and now it's a great idea. You're like going, where the hell is it? And in the legislature, you've lost 2 years because that's the position you took. That's it was silly, right? And so that's where I sit on that. I would like to see it better. I got a lot of stuff done, and with reaching across the aisle, even had my bill vetoed by a governor, and then tried to override the veto in our House, and went to Republicans who voted for it, and they look you right in the face and they say, William, I voted for it before, I'm voting for it again. Even though it was a Republican governor, I gave you my word, I voted for it, I'm voting for it again. That's like stand-up stuff, right?
That's awesome.
And so I was like, that's where we need to get back to.
Yeah. And do you find that, it seems like you do reach across the aisle quite often to get things accomplished. Do you have like a fear of being ostracized or kind of like a pariah for certain issues if you do tend to buck the trend of your party?
Both parties have these, these little litmus tests every now and then in doing it. For me, I've always known that seats have a, number one, they're not your seat. It's not your seat. you're occupying a people's seat, and they all have a shelf life, right? The legislature, we have term limits. Now, if you're due to 12 years, your term's over, but it's got an end date. It's got a shelf life. In Congress, no time limits, but people get defeated all the time. People die in office. So my thing is, this is going to end one day. What are you going to do while you're there? And I've been threatened many a times since they're going to run somebody against me, or they're going to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get to go home, practice law, be with my kids. Please, no, don't. While I'm here, this is the work I'm going to do. Am I going to make mistakes? Yeah, probably. We all do it, stuff like that. But I'm going to do the best that I can. But I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not going to, if I think it's something right, I'm going to do that. It's we had one of the rural guys, Republican, had an issue with their water. They couldn't get water. They had this aquifer down there. They didn't have the money in their county to get it. And a private company came in and said, we want to buy the rights and pump up in it. And a lot of my Democratic friends were against it. But they came to me and they said, William, we got the water. We just can't afford to get it. How do we get it if, and I said, you know what, you got a point, and I voted for it. They were like, oh, Democrats, that's bad policy. I'm like going, well, what answer do you have for them? They didn't have one. I said, okay, then I stand by my vote. You got to be able to do that, and this is, this arena is, not for sissies. It shouldn't be always putting, and every politician does it, but you shouldn't every time put your finger in the air and check the wind. And sometimes just do the right thing, and it, 9 times out of 10, it works itself out the way it's supposed to, it all works out, and if you lose your seat by doing the right thing, hey, worse things can happen. Better than losing your seat because you did the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And awesome to see that you operate with such integrity in your position. So love to hear that.
Yeah, much integrity as you can do in this, and David will tell you too, there's not a politician spending any time in here that hasn't plugged their nose and voted for something. When you're doing the horse trading and stuff like that, you're gonna step in some manure and stuff, and you gotta deal with the smell. So,
hey, Landon.
That's awesome. Yes.
Hey, it's Shawnee. Hey, William.
Hey,
thank
Shawnee.
you so much for doing this. So I have a question. You're talking a lot about camaraderie, and one thing that I learned was important is sometimes having positive relationships with other lobbyists, and maybe talk a little bit about, for the group, proper etiquette when you're lobbying, what I'm saying, things not to do to your peers. I think that's important too, because the last thing you want to do is send somebody up there and they upset one of their peers and get them on their bad side. But I think having positive relationship with your peers is just as important as with the legislators. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. One thing in these talks I usually tell people, about their integrity and their honesty to policymakers, because if you're dishonest, you lie to them, whatever, like you're DOA, you can't do your job anymore because they don't trust you. And that's the same with amongst your colleagues. Your colleagues, Shawnee will tell you, you're going to have issues to where you get a group of lobbyists are all on the same side, and say, okay, how can we get this ball across the line, or how can we kill this bill, or whatever, amend it, but there could be another bill that very same session that you're on opposite sides of, right? And now you're opponents, but if you don't have a good relationship with them, and if they can't trust, what you're saying and doing, and you're doing this unethical stuff, again, you're DOA, because there are times where you're going to need the help of somebody else, because say for instance, I'm having trouble with certain legislator or a group of legislators, but I know this lobbyist, Shawnee, has a great relationship with them, and hey, Shawnee, would you mind going and talking? I got this issue, and Shawnee says, yeah, I can talk to him about it, and Shawnee may say, hey, William, you got a great, relationship over here, and I don't even, can you, help me, or at least get me an introduction? Yeah. But if we didn't have a good relationship, Shawnee would tell me, yeah, too bad, too sad for you, William, you're going to find another way. I'm not going to, again, bend over backwards to help you, but you got to recognize that, you need each other every now and then, and to help each other, it's actually a good thing, and that has bode well for me. I had a good relationship with some lobbyists when I was a legislator, and even when I knew I was leaving, I used to say, I said, I know when you're a legislator, everybody thinks, you blow sunshine up your skirt, you're the best thing since sliced bread, everything, and all that, right? But that, when you're no longer, the phone's going to stop ringing and all this other stuff. And I used to say, there are 5 people here that I think I'll still be friends with after I leave. And I was pretty close, you know, not that I'm not friends with the other, but the other, it was still genuine. And now they're lobbyists and I'm a lobbyist too. And I have a good working relationship. And I've been on opposite ends with them as well.
Great. Thank you, sir. All right, we have a few more minutes. If there's anyone who has any reservations, anything that they've been holding on to, please submit in our chat box or shout it out. We would love to have a question or two. If there are any remaining, don't want anyone to feel like they didn't get to have access with William.
Zelena, I'd like to, you know, say this thing before we run out of time. And so we're talking about advocacy and the alumni board. And guys, it's you know, hopefully you take this out. And some of you on here have heard me say this before, and I, you know, sound like a broken record. But, you know, your association with the university, your degree with the university is extremely important. It's extremely valuable. And I like to treat mine like a stock, you know, my 2 degrees, like, you know, Apple stock, you know, and how the university goes, so does the value of your degree. And that value goes up and down by its alum, right? The alumni is what makes that value go up and down. And I tell the story about, you know, Chief Justice Rehnquist and Sandra Day O'Connor, you know, everybody talks about how, you know, they're Stanford graduates, you know, and went to the United States Supreme Court and all those. But when they went to Stanford, Stanford wasn't Stanford, you know, it was the graduates later that made Stanford, you know. And now look at our new vice president, Kamala Harris. You know, Howard is always a good school, right? What do you think Howard's stock price is today, now that they have a vice president of the United States as an alum? You know, it's what we do with our degrees as we go out into the world that reflects on our university. And that brings up that value to that stock, that makes that, you know, us move up in the ranks. That makes, you know, when you're out job hunting, when you're out, you know, even when you're out seeking grants for nonprofits, all these things that you do, when they associate you with a certain school, whatever, it matters. It matters. And so your engagement with the university and your engagement with fellow alums and your engagement with undergrads and stuff like that all attributes to the value of our school. And if you want to make it more selfish, it attributes to the value of your degree. And so if you want it to be something notable and of value, you know, give back in some way and do that. And that's what I try to do. And I know everyone else on the alumni board and the staff, they all try to do that as well. And I invite you to do so to help keep moving our school upwards.
Wow, what a brilliant, brilliant analogy to close with, William. I don't think you could paint a clearer picture than using the stock analogy as far as, you know, what we put into the university will get out as far as the value of our degrees and the value of our alumni network. So thank you for sharing that. I think that is just so eloquently stated, and I don't think you could find a clearer illustration than that. So thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And before we conclude, I want to give a big thanks to Leanne Lee, to Stacy Purcell, to Renee for all the help with this presentation. They are definitely the foundation, the backbone for everything that we do. I mention this every single time I speak, but you guys have no idea how much they do behind the scenes to support us, really to push our efforts, especially Leanne. She's just phenomenal. Always.
Leanne's been great, and I've known Leanne when she was a lobbyist and I was a legislator a long time. She's awesome. Paul Barakin too, you know, and remember, it's like, yeah,
definitely my partner in crime, and I would not be able to do any of the stuff without her assistance. So thank you, Leanne, and thank you, Stacy, as well. All right, gang. Thank you all for joining us. I think it's been an awesome exchange of ideas and just listening to William elaborate on his experience in the legislature is just so invaluable. I definitely do not take it for granted, William, the time that you devoted to this and the prep before it. I hope that everybody who joined the call found value in it and is now more inspired to go out and be a rebel advocate. And just keep that closing thought of Williams in your mind, that whatever we contribute to the university is going to raise the university's stock and we'll all benefit from it. So I just think that's a perfect conclusion. And so if there's no further thoughts or comments, we will adjourn our meeting. And thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good